Good evening, everyone. This is for recording, not for amplification, so thank you. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for being here tonight for the opening of and the viewing of our Jonesville memory project, the Fresco that we're debuting here at the Kentucky Museum. It's been a wonderful summer watching these artists work, creating community of their own. They're going to come up in just a moment, but I wanted to thank a few different people because as Alice and I were talking about just a few minutes ago at a different meeting we were at, that it did start with this concept of community. I want to really thank our artist in residence who recently has retired, Lynn Ferguson. She came to us with this idea about how can we make our lobby more inviting and how can it be something about community. So she's the one that really kicked off this idea and the way we took it forward. From that, we started to talk about what is community. First, there was the idea of a fresco. When you have somebody who's a fresco master in your midst and who does this wonderful work, we tapped into Mike Nichols and talked to him about this idea. How can we think about community? How can we do this? Would you want to do this? And he was very game for that. As we started talking more, Alice Gatewood Waddell came into the picture as well. So we all started talking about what does the idea of community mean? What kinds of scenes would we like to see? Is it a representation of people? What does that mean? And we started to talk more, and Alice started to think more, and we started to think about actual smaller communities in our midst, one of them being Jonesville. We started talking about what that community meant. What does WK community mean? What is the juxtaposition or connection between those two kinds of things that historically has not been talked about very much? What does that mean? So we thought we latched onto something very special, and I feel we really did. So that's how that started. I also want to thank a couple different people before I turn it over to Alice. Tiffany Iselhart, she was very instrumental. She's our marketing director here, manager here, and does a lot of work with exhibits. She was instrumental in writing the grant, and the granting agency was our friends at the Carpenter Foundation, who've been very thoughtful. They've given us our first grant to do free admission for all, which was really great a couple years ago, to make this entire museum accessible to everyone. I also want to thank our preparators, Charles Hurst and Eleanor Davidson, people who, along with the artists you're going to hear from, and maybe some of the students who are here today who worked with them all summer, they were the backbone who really held and helped them with the process. So they're wonderful craftspeople themselves, and I wanted to thank them as well. And I really want to thank you all for being here. This is going to be a springboard for a lot of things, a lot of conversations that we're going to be able to have about something that we haven't talked about for a long time, and it's darn time to be able to do that. So it's a beautiful piece, and I think our artists are here today to give you the talk that you really came for. So I want to thank you, and I want to turn this over to Alice Gatewood Waddell to begin things off. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for everybody that came out to show your interest in the project. And I'm about to not breathe at all. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to get a little air in my nose, but I'll keep my mask on. The fresco mirror became a lot more than just a painting on the wall, and it served several purposes in my view. The first thing that I felt like it did was it provided the opportunity to preserve the history of a community that once existed on land owned by free slaves, which after being unfairly demolished became acquired by WKU for its extension. So that's the relationship between Jonesville community and the WKU community from the onset. The image created serves as a small tribute and never forgotten memory of the Jonesville community. Jonesville was a thriving black community where people enjoyed their livelihood, cultivated the land, built businesses, a church, a school, only to be erased with very little regard for the impact that it would have on the families that live there, not to speak of the unfair compensation. The mural depicts the curiosity of young people who lived in Jonesville as they pointed to the hill, wondering why they had no access to a place that was so near. It also portrays the sadness and the gloom of a couple as they leave their beloved homes and their community. All the while, the sky indicates the storm is coming towards the community and would eventually cast a shadow of complete destruction. While everyone may not know this story, I hope the mural will pique one's interest and inspire us to seek fair treatment for all people as we move forward, rather than allowing history to repeat itself. Secondly, the process of transferring my original image into a fresco mural was such a valuable experience in itself, and Mike will talk to you more about the whole process. But I want to just share a little bit about our human experience and personal experience as we worked on the mural. There was great chemistry with the group that we formed. We formed our team, and immediately we was almost like family. As we worked, we talked about the history of Jonesville. I shared my personal stories and ties in my visits to Jonesville with the interns and the people that stopped by. We talked about the importance of preserving history and revealing the truth as artists and folklorists. The truth that bears witness to the good, the bad, and the ugly. Lastly, and I promise when I say lastly, I'm going to be last. I'm not going to be like the preachers that say, as I take my seat, and I'm going to be here 30 minutes later. But lastly, I would like to say, by divine order, as we built the mural, we began building a new community. As people visited our workspace, we invited some to add a stroke or two in order to be a part of the subject or the project of honoring the memory of Jonesville and its livelihood. It is my hopes that this kind of interaction will not only result in a great and awesome mural, but inspires those who view it to be good stewards of humanity. It is no coincidence that the fresco method of painting and the subject of Jonesville happen to be a perfect marriage. This technique will preserve the memory of Jonesville for decades to come. It's a strong, durable, and sustainable, just like the ancestors and descendants of Jonesville. So at this time, since I was talking about our team and family that we built, I would like to introduce our interns and ask them to share a little bit about their experience. So you guys can come up. This is Aisha and Riley, and I'm not going to jack up last names or anything because my memory is terrible, but introduce yourselves and just tell them some of the things that you want them to know about your experience.
Okay. My name's Riley Alone, and I actually did write a little, very small something. So first of all, I want to say I'm so incredibly thankful to be a part of this amazing experience. It was really amazing to work with everyone on this team, and I'm so lucky to have learned so much from Alice and Mike, and to have made such a wonderful friend in Aisha. Like Alice said, we truly did become family towards the end, and the beginning, I guess. Being able to learn more about Jonestown was truly eye-opening, and to be part of such a poignant project is something that I'll cherish forever. And I just want to thank you guys so much for letting me just be a part of it. That's all.
Thank you.
My name is Aisha Salafu, and I was one of the interns that had the honor of working with Mike and Alice in this project. I think being a part of this is honestly such an honor because it's going to be something that will last forever in comparison to Jonesville that was torn down. I just want to thank you guys for being here today. It's honestly it's so exciting to see everyone here and see how much we touch the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so here comes the exciting part. Mike can tell y'all how we got this done.
That was really beautiful, Alice. Okay, thank you all for being here also. So I specialize in buon fresco, which is the technique we used for the Jonesville mural. So I thought I'd start off by just talking a little bit about the technique and how we built the mural and how it might relate to Alice's beautiful image that she designed for the project. So the term fresco itself translates from Italian to mean fresh. It's because it's a technique that requires an artist paint into freshly made plaster. You can kind of think of fresh plaster as a kind of squishy form of stone. And so a fresco painter like myself would spread that squishy stone onto a surface like a wall or a ceiling. And as that plaster interacts with the atmosphere, it undergoes a chemical change that eventually turns it into stone, which is kind of cool. Now, if a fresco painter can add pigment to that plaster before that chemical reaction is finished, the actual particles of pigment become locked into the stone forever. And that's exactly what fresco is. It's a way of painting not onto stone, but into stone. You can kind of think of it like a kind of wall tattoo, which is pretty neat. So throughout history, fresco was prized for its durability. Probably most notably, it was used by the artists of the Italian Renaissance. They prized it above all other forms of painting. They used it for their most important subject matter, which was usually religious or political content. Arguably, the most famous fresco in history was the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, painted by Michelangelo Buonarroti. And what I can tell you is that we use those same time-honored processes and techniques to fresco the Jonesville mural that's in the lobby here at the Kentucky Museum, which is kind of awesome. And we hoped that by painting Alice's image into stone, that will give her work a lasting presence on campus and serve as a reminder of the Jonesville community for generations to come. And honestly, some things need to be remembered and not forgotten. So, in addition to what Alice's work provides this campus and the community, the project itself offered several really unique educational opportunities for WK students, which we've already learned about, in the form of internships. So first, Riley and Aisha and Cecilia Morris, who's not here today, were able to work side by side with Alice Gatewood Waddell, who is a renowned artist who exhibits her work and is collected across the United States. That's a pretty special experience for art students and even biochem majors. So in addition to that, they were able to learn in a complete way the buon fresco technique from start to finish. That's pretty special too. There are maybe one or two places in the United States where a student can actually learn the technique of fresco in a comprehensive way like this. So that's kind of cool. They were incredible. I applaud you. We could not have done this without them. They did a lot of the heavy lifting, literally moving thousands of pounds of sand and crushed marble and lime putty, right? You can attest to that. And they were very, very good at the technique. They made significant contributions at every stage of this fresco process. Seriously, we could not have done it without them. I oftentimes joke, because they became so good at fresco, that I hope I don't become sick, because I was afraid I would come back and find the mural was completed without me, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to transition now and just talk a little bit about the process that we used to make the fresco that's in the lobby. We started the process, I think, in about, was it April?
April.
April, yeah. And so the team got together, and the interns in particular processed a lot of the raw materials for the fresco, which included them washing and drying and sifting 1,500 pounds of sand and crushed marble, right? Quite a bit of stuff, yeah. At the same time, Charles Hurst and Eleanor Davidson constructed the subwall in the lobby and added the frame, which would be the support that we would put metal lath and subsequent layers of plaster to. Early in the summer, we decided to go ahead and start adding plaster. And this particular fresco has 5 layers of plaster. And that's significant because additional layers of plaster give durability and strength to the fresco, and also offers several benefits to the painting process as well. So the first 3 layers of plaster, as you might have been able to see a little bit on this time lapse that we made, they went up one at a time. We would give a week between coats so that the plaster could fully cure and become hardened. And then we'd add another coat. We did that 3 times, and then we began the painting process, which was its own adventure. It took us 7 sections to finish the fresco painting. And for those who are unfamiliar, frescoes like this go up like jigsaw puzzles. And it's because we only plaster what we can finish painting in a single session. That's an important idea because any pigment or paint that's applied to the plaster after it dries doesn't bond to the plaster. It doesn't become part of the stone. It sits on the surface like dust or powder. It's the exact opposite of what we want, which is permanence, right? So we did this process of adding coats of plaster and painting on the same day 7 times, and then we were finished with the process. And in between, we were very careful to carve away any portions of the fresco that we didn't finish in that same day that we started painting. And I guess we were very clever with how we hid the end of one day's work to join the next day's work so that the seams between the days are hidden along the natural contours of Alice's image. We did a pretty good job of that. The interns were spectacular. And I encourage that you might go out into the mural and look and see if you can't find a seam or two while you're admiring the beauty of it. So some of them are more visible, and quite a few of them I would be surprised if you found them, actually. So, before I end this talk, I just wanted to finish by addressing Alice and saying, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your vision and your voice in this project. It's been a true honor to work with both of you and Alice for the past few months. It's been one of the highlights of my time here at Western. So, thank you all very much. Did anybody have questions for Alice or the interns or myself? Yes.
What kind of paint did you use?
So that is a wonderful question. That is what makes fresco fresco. It's not technically paint until it hits the wall. So we use pigment, which is colored. It's powdered color. It's a very specific pigment. It has to be certain kinds of colors. And they're just mixed with distilled water. And so if I were to mix up, it looks like paint, but if I were to put it on the wall here and let it dry, it's just powder. It doesn't actually bind to the wall. But if you actually apply it to the limestone excretes these microscopic crystals, which sort of like surround and encase those particles of pigment and lock it into the stone forever. So technically, paint needs a binder, and the binder would be the wall. Can I answer your question? That's a really good question. Any other questions? Yes.
If you could just walk us through how the art was drawn before being put onto it.
So, do you mean like how the design was emerged, or how we actually transferred the design to the fresco?
The how it was put together, the art.
That would be a question for Alice.
Well, that's both of them.
Okay.
The concept, I did an original painting of what we were going to transition onto the wall. So the interns actually, under Mike's instructions, they used a projector. Let him tell y'all, okay, before I tell you something wrong. But anyway, the original painting was what I designed. And I did several studies and sketches of the ideas that I had in mind, and maybe about 4. And after looking at them, I couldn't choose any one particular one. So I just put them all together. So Mike can tell you from the original, the next step that we took to begin the mural.
In fact, we decided that we would photograph her original work and then project it in the space on the blank wall to see if we liked its scale and how it fit the space. And in fact, like, there were changes that were made after that point. Alice had decided to extend the fresco and change the format a little bit, and then we used that new image. We photographed the new image that she had made, and used that to actually project onto the wet plaster when we were painting it. So you might get a glimpse of the projector every once in a while in the time lapse. So I tried not to hide it completely in the time lapse because I wanted to be very transparent about, no pun intended there, about how we proceeded with this process.
So it looks kind of like a coloring book with everything outlined before we start actually painting it, using the color, applying the colors to it. It's just kind of like a cartoon or a coloring book, and that has to be done, like he said, in sections, and whatever we can paint that day is the area that we do. In the next session, we start all over again.
Those painting sessions they're difficult. It's a lot of work. In fact, 10 to 12 hours in a single day, where you're pretty much standing on your feet doing this. It's a lot of work. And so what you hope is to not have to scrape it away at the end of the day. That, you want to make sure that it's true and it's held up.
So that's there is a way, if you really mess something up, you literally have to destroy it and start again.
Yeah. There's no eraser in Fresco. There's only a chisel.
Does that go through all the layers?
No, that's great. So you really just need to, in our case, we put 2 coats of plaster on the day we painted. And the reason of that was to keep the plaster damp longer. So there was a double layer. And that would give us more time to paint, which is really important. But really, you just need to scrape away to the coat that you started on that day.
Okay.
So the first 3 coats are always there. In fact, Alice was talking about this a minute ago about the cartoon outlines. We put 3 coats of plaster, and then we projected Alice's image full size into that space, and then used a red paint to outline her image. That is, in the fresco world, called a synopia. It comes from the word that's named after the pigment. It comes from a place in Turkey. And well, anyway, you can see a little bit poking through here. And so what that is a registration tool. And so what we would do is we would plaster over the area we wanted to paint that day. And plaster is not transparent, so you can't see through it to see the synopia. So then what we would do is project the image over the top again and line it up with the areas that we could see. And in doing so, the projector was registered over the area that didn't have outline. We could then trace it and connect all the lines within the new plaster to the underlayer. So that's how everything sort of stayed lined up properly. In the old days, they used paper to do that, cartoons. Literally cartoons. They would poke little holes through them and pound them with charcoal so that they didn't have projectors. Yes.
2 questions. One is, Alice mentioned the symbolism of the storm clouds.
Yeah.
What other symbolism is there? And where else can we read about Jonesville?
You can read about it right upstairs in the library. There's been lots of articles written. We have a folklorist here, Maxine Ray, who could reference you all day as far as where you could find photographs or information on Jonesville. She's done a lot of work on Jonesville herself and once lived there, so that's good first-hand information. Other symbolism, there is, of course, the couple. They're leaving the community, and you can see the gestures, and they exhibit a sad, gloomy mood just in posture, and you can tell that the husband is being very supportive of his wife, the way he's holding her. The children pointing towards the top of the hill, wondering what's going on there. We could literally almost throw a rock there, but we're not included in that side of the street and what goes on at the top of the hill. Somebody asked me about the sunflowers earlier. There were actually sunflowers in the neighborhoods and in the fields, and they were very visible from time to time. At first, I had to ask a few people what that. I think I asked you. I called my older sister. I said, "Am I tripping, or was it really sunflowers there?" And they was both like, "Yeah, it was sunflowers and thistles, and you could see them in the fields." And you had to think about at one point in time there was, a lot of farmland and outdoor toilets that you had to walk a little distance from the house to use, and you would see the fields and the sunflowers in the field. Plus, I also made up a story, and somebody asked me one day when we were painting about the sunflowers. I said, I just put them there because they make me happy. So they do brighten the heaviness of the subject in some ways.
So inviting. Was there significance to the wall, Alice? No.
Oh, the wall. Well, the wall wasn't actually in Jonesville. That tells the story. So I put the wall in, and I used the technique like the stonemasons used, rather than just like something with signage, because quite a few of the men in the community were stonemasons, and they built some of the walls that you see around Bowling Green. As a matter of fact, the one on campus, just probably before you get to Bates Runner, on that side of campus, my great-grandfather was a stonemason, and he was one of the people that helped build that wall, and also the walls around Fisk University in Nashville. So that was some of the work that people in Jonesville, some of the men, did. And that is where I got the idea of making the wall look that way.
It's a wonderful coincidence that, Fresco is a masonry technique, too. So
Yeah.
Another tie-in which was completely coincidental,
Oh, Mike, and you can share, because you made me realize that the location of the mural itself and what it faced, you can tell them.
We talked a little bit. I kind of imagined that, the fresco is sort of flanked by two windows that look into the courtyard. But really, I almost thought of the mural as a window past the museum itself, looking down the Avenue of Champions, which is where Jonesville was. So.
Yeah, so that was coincidental, but like I said, a lot of things is kind of like divine order as well. We may think it's coincidental, but actually, if it does face if there weren't buildings and structures there, it would face the Jonesville neighborhood.
Did the train track go through Jonesville, or did it border on Jonesville?
It was behind it.
Behind,
Mhm.
so it's between the railroad track.
Most people's property, Maxine, you can help me out on this. Did most people's property end before the railroad track?
Ended at the railroad track.
Yeah,
At the
yeah,
railroad.
but nothing on the other side.
No.
Right.
Do you all see yourselves working with the newly found Jonesville Academy that is here in Lansdale?
Probably. I know a lot of the people that's affiliated with that. As a matter of fact, my son is one of the teachers, and one of the founders, Aurelia Spalding. We've worked together on many, many projects over the years. So I'm sure that we will, and I'm sure they will be visiting the mural, field trips, and being able to see it themselves, and we'll probably have some classes centered around that as well. So.
we'll be floating around the mural, so if there are some other questions that come up, please feel free to approach us. Let's give them another